Every evening, beneath the chaos of New York City, a 12-year-old black boy stood alone in a subway corner, his tiny fingers dancing over a scratched-up violin, pouring out melodies that didn't just echo through the tunnels, they reached broken hearts. Malik didn't play for money. He played for his late mother. For the silence of grief. For the little hope left in his soul. Until one ordinary evening, a billionaire's autistic daughter stopped dead in her tracks, mesmerized by Malik's song. She hadn't smiled in weeks. But now, she did. That one smile changed everything. And what happened next would prove that even in the most divided corners of society, music, love, and the human spirit can build a bridge stronger than money or status. This is not just a story about kindness. It's a story about how a homeless boy gave something to a millionaire that all his money never could, and how that millionaire gave the boy back his future. Malik was only 12, but the weight on his shoulders made him feel twice that age. Every morning began the same, in a cramped shelter bed beside his grandmother, the two of them huddled beneath a single donated blanket. The sound of coughing, babies crying, and rusted pipes groaning overhead had long replaced the lullabies his mother used to hum. She had been gone for nearly a year, taken suddenly by a heart attack that Malik still didn't quite understand. One moment, she had been dancing to Sam Cooke in their tiny kitchen, and the next, he was alone in a world too loud and too fast. He still carried her violin. It wasn't much, its varnish had faded, the bowstring was frayed, and one of the tuning pegs had to be held in place with a rubber band. But to Malik, it was priceless. His mother had played it every Sunday morning after church, her fingers moving like water, her eyes closed as if she were somewhere far away. She taught him how to hold it properly, how to breathe with the music, how to listen not just with his ears, but with his heart. Every song tells a story, baby, she used to say. You just gotta be brave enough to let people hear yours. Malik had no home. But he had his story. And he told it every day in the heart of the city, in the one place where people moved fast but sometimes stopped to listen, the subway station on 42nd Street. He would set up near the corner, where the acoustics were best, just beneath a flickering light that buzzed like a trapped bee. He didn't put out a hat. He didn't ask for money. That wasn't why he played. The violin wasn't about survival, it was about remembering. About staying connected to the only person who had ever truly seen him. When he played, the rest of the world disappeared, the smell of stale coffee, the footsteps rushing past, the occasional jeers of strangers. None of it mattered. His mother's spirit lived in every note he drew from those fragile strings. People noticed him. Some stopped for a few seconds, their heads tilted, surprised by the purity in his playing. A few dropped coins in his case anyway, or simply whispered, "Thank you," before hurrying away. Others ignored him completely, mistaking him for just another lost soul in a city overflowing with them. But Malik didn't play for recognition. He played because his heart didn't know how not to. His grandmother worried, of course. She wanted him safe inside, buried in schoolbooks like other kids his age. But the city's systems had failed them. The shelters were overcrowded, and the waiting lists for stable housing were endless. She did the best she could, keeping him fed with what little they had, stitching up holes in his socks with trembling hands. She was proud of him, though. Quietly, fiercely proud. Malik, on the other hand, often felt invisible. In school, he kept his head down, never raising his hand even when he knew the answers. He didn't have the latest shoes or lunch packed in a cute insulated box. He had a bruised lunch card and hand-me-down jeans that sagged at the knees. Teachers praised his musical gift, but few understood the cost behind it. Music was his only anchor in a life where everything else seemed to drift. There was a dignity in how he carried himself. Even in the cold, even when his fingers turned raw and red, he stood tall when he played. He never begged, never looked anyone in the eye unless they looked at him first. And when someone truly stopped to listen, really listened, his music changed. It became deeper, more alive. Like his soul was reaching out and asking, "Do you see me? Do you hear me?" But most people didn't. Not really. In a city obsessed with noise, it was rare for anyone to notice the quiet kind of pain Malik carried. The kind that wrapped around his chest when he saw other kids holding their parents' hands. The kind that whispered at night when he closed his eyes and imagined what their old apartment might have smelled like if his mother were still alive. Yet every day, he returned to that subway corner. Every day, he chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, his song would reach someone who needed it. Someone who would stop, not out of pity, but out of connection. He didn't know it yet, but that someone was coming. And when they did, everything would change. Andrew Whitaker had built an empire with his bare hands. At just 41, he was the founder and CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company that powered cloud infrastructure for half of Silicon Valley. His face graced the covers of business magazines. His keynote speeches drew crowds of thousands. His name was synonymous with innovation, precision, and relentless control. But despite all that power, Andrew often felt helpless in the one place where it mattered most, at home, with his daughter, Lily. Lily was 8. She was quiet, intelligent, and utterly unlike any child Andrew had ever known. Diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, she communicated in fragments, sometimes through humming, sometimes through drawings, and sometimes not at all. She didn't like loud sounds, sudden movements, or the feel of certain fabrics. But what she loved, with a purity that Andrew had never been able to replicate, was routine. Every morning at precisely 7:10, they left their sleek penthouse apartment in Midtown. Every evening at precisely 6:30, they returned home, riding the subway because Lily refused to sit in a car, even a private one. She liked the vibration of the train, the rhythm of the tunnels, and the consistency of the underground world. Above ground, life felt too unpredictable. Below, it moved with a kind of structure that made her feel safe. Andrew had spent millions trying to help her, top neurologists, elite therapy centers, experimental interventions. He had read every book, tried every diet, installed soundproof playrooms and sensory walls in their home. Nothing had worked. Lily smiled less now than she did a year ago, laughed less, spoke less. And while Andrew's board meetings ran smoothly and his stock prices soared, his heart broke a little more each time he failed to reach her. That's why he didn't notice the boy at first. Just another performer in the blur of subway noise and faces. Another piece of New York's background. But Lily noticed. She stopped walking. Andrew almost kept moving, used to her small hesitations. But this time, she didn't tug his sleeve. She didn't hide behind his coat. She stood still, eyes wide, head tilted toward the soft hum of violin music coming from across the platform. It was faint at first, almost like a whisper between the tracks. But it grew, note by note, into something haunting and beautiful. A song Andrew didn't recognize, but Lily did. Or at least, it seemed like she did. Because for the first time in weeks, her face changed. Her lips curled, just slightly, into a fragile smile. She sat down on the cold concrete floor, cross-legged, her eyes fixed on the source of the sound. Andrew hesitated, confused, then followed her gaze, and finally saw him. The boy couldn't have been more than 12. Thin, with patched-up clothes and a violin that had clearly seen better days. He played without looking up, completely absorbed. His fingers moved with the ease of someone far older, far wiser. There was no showmanship. Just truth. Just feeling. Andrew sat beside Lily in stunned silence. She didn't fidget. She didn't hum. She simply listened, her eyes glistening in the artificial light. The music wrapped around her like a blanket, soft and gentle, but powerful in a way Andrew couldn't understand. It was as if the song reached into her chest and unlocked something long buried beneath silence and confusion. When the music stopped, Lily didn't speak. But she looked at Andrew with a clarity he hadn't seen in years. No tears, no words, just a look that said I felt that. And then, without waiting for him, she stood and walked across the platform to place a small folded origami swan at the boy's feet. Andrew didn't stop her. He didn't say anything at all. He just watched her walk back, her tiny hand brushing against the boy's as she passed. The boy looked up for the first time then, just briefly. Their eyes met. And for a moment, there was no subway, no noise, no wealth or poverty, just two children who had both lost something, and found a glimpse of it again through music. That night, Lily fell asleep to silence, no humming, no rocking, no tears. Just peace. Andrew stood by her door for a long time, watching her breathe, wondering how one boy with a battered violin had done what no specialist ever could. The next day, at exactly 6:30, Lily insisted they go back. And Andrew, for the first time in his adult life, changed his schedule, not for a meeting, not for a boardroom, but for a boy in the subway who had played a song that gave his daughter back her smile. The days that followed became a rhythm of their own. Every evening, without fail, Lily asked to visit the subway station. Not the park, not the toy store, not the carefully designed sensory room that Andrew had built for her with input from experts around the globe. Only the subway. Only the music. She never said the boy's name, and Andrew didn't know it. But the connection was undeniable. She sat cross-legged as always, waiting for the first note. The moment the bow touched the string, Lily's entire body relaxed. Her fingers traced invisible patterns in the air, following the melody as if she could see it unfolding before her eyes. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she drew quietly. Once, she even laughed, just once, soft and quick, like a bird startled into flight. But to Andrew, it was everything. He began to watch the boy more closely. There was something about him that went beyond skill. His playing wasn't rehearsed, it was raw and honest. The kind of music that only came from lived experience, from grief and courage stitched into every chord. It was more than talent. It was survival, transformed into something sacred. Andrew noticed the boy never looked up. He rarely acknowledged the crowd, didn't respond to coins or compliments. He came, he played, and he left. Each time, Lily would offer a gift, a crayon drawing, a paper crane, a small red marble. Each time, the boy accepted with the same quiet nod. It wasn't a friendship in the traditional sense. It was something quieter. Something deeper. Andrew couldn't stop thinking about him. Who was this child? Where did he live? Why did someone so young carry such sadness in his eyes? He asked around, security guards, other performers, even station workers. Few knew his name. Some called him the ghost violinist, a quiet mystery who appeared and disappeared with no explanation. One evening, as they sat listening, a man passing by sneered and muttered under his breath, "Why's a billionaire letting his kid sit on the ground next to a street rat?" The words weren't meant to be heard, but Andrew did. And in that moment, something inside him hardened. He realized how easy it was for people to judge what they didn't understand. The man saw only what was on the surface: money, difference, discomfort. He didn't see the truth, that the boy wasn't a problem. He was the answer. He had reached Lily in a way no one else ever had. And for that, Andrew owed him more than words. But how could he help without breaking the fragile connection that had formed? He didn't want to scare the boy away. He didn't want Lily to lose the only joy she had rediscovered in months. So he waited. Observed. Researched. And what he found broke his heart. The boy's name was Malik. He was 12, homeless, and living in a temporary shelter with his grandmother. His mother, once a violinist in a small church ensemble, had died of a sudden cardiac arrest. There was no father listed on school records. Malik was still enrolled in school, though his attendance was irregular. He had no formal training in music. Everything he played, he had learned by ear, by memory, by feeling. Andrew couldn't fathom it. A child with no teacher, no home, no resources, yet with a gift more powerful than anything money could buy. It stirred something deep in him, something he hadn't felt in years. Not pity. Not guilt. But awe. He began to send quiet help. A new pair of gloves left near Malik's usual corner. A fresh set of violin strings slipped into the open case. A clean wool scarf, folded and placed on the bench beside him. Malik never looked around. He never asked who had left the items. But he used them. And Andrew knew that was enough, for now. Lily, unaware of the silent support, continued her ritual. She brought a small journal one day and wrote one word on the first page: music. Then she handed it to Malik and walked away without a word. The next evening, she brought it again. This time, he wrote back, hope. Each night, a new word appeared. Quiet. Rain. Mother. Stars. A silent conversation, blooming in a world that had tried to quiet them both. They were telling their stories, not through sentences, but through understanding. One note, one word, one moment at a time. Andrew saw it all unfold like a miracle. Two souls, scarred in different ways, finding refuge in each other. He began to believe that maybe this was why all his power, all his fortune, all his effort had led him to this exact spot in a crowded subway station, so he could learn what it meant to truly see someone. Not through numbers or credentials or profit margins, but through the quiet brilliance of a child with nothing to give except everything. Winter came hard that year. The subways grew colder, the air sharper, and the crowd thinner. Fewer musicians played underground. But every evening, Malik remained. Wrapped in the scarf, hands tucked into the gloves, he played not for coins, but for Lily. And every night, she came, journal in hand, her world stitched back together note by note. The subway station, once a place of noise and shadows, had become a sanctuary. Andrew made quiet arrangements behind the scenes. He contacted the shelter director. He funded Malik's meals anonymously. He spoke to school administrators about tutoring and support. He found a retired concert violinist willing to offer private lessons, someone who understood that greatness didn't always come from privilege. But Malik never asked for these things. He simply accepted the kindness with the same grace he brought to his music. He had known struggle his entire life, and yet, he carried no bitterness, only resilience. One evening, after playing a soft, almost whisper-like lullaby, Malik placed the journal beside Lily and didn't open it again. Instead, he looked up, directly, fully, and smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't ask for anything. A smile that simply said, "Thank you." That night, Lily spoke at home. Full sentences. Simple thoughts. But words, real and strong. She asked about the violin. She asked about Malik. She asked to learn music. For Andrew, those words were worth more than all his stock options and patents combined. For years, he had tried to reach his daughter through structure and science. But it was through rhythm and compassion that she finally found her voice. Music offered not as therapy, but as truth. He invited Malik and his grandmother to dinner, carefully, respectfully. They came hesitantly at first, unsure what a billionaire could want from them. But Lily met them at the door, holding her journal open to a single word: family. The walls between their worlds began to fall. Not out of pity or charity, but out of connection. Andrew discovered that Malik's grandmother, once a music teacher in the public school system, had given up her dreams to care for her grandson. He offered her a role, overseeing a new arts program he was quietly funding for underprivileged youth across the city. A program where Malik could learn, grow, and lead others like him. Soon, music filled Andrew's penthouse. Lily began lessons. Malik practiced in a small studio Andrew had built for him downtown. Their journals became filled with songs, drawings, and conversations more meaningful than any speech Andrew had ever given to shareholders. What started as a single chance encounter had evolved into something far more profound, a new harmony between lives that were never meant to cross, but needed to. The media caught on eventually. A photo taken by a commuter, of Lily listening intently to Malik in the subway, went viral. The headlines came: "Billionaire's autistic daughter finds her voice through subway violinist." Reporters reached out, stories were written, but Andrew declined interviews. This wasn't about optics. This wasn't a narrative to control. It was real, and it was sacred. Still, the attention brought opportunities. A nonprofit offered Malik a scholarship to attend a prestigious music conservatory. Andrew quietly matched the funds to ensure his grandmother's housing would never be in jeopardy again. Malik's music was now heard in concert halls, but he still returned to the subway sometimes, not to perform, but to remember. Lily stood taller now. She walked with confidence. She had friends. She asked questions. Her therapists, amazed, tried to explain the neurological breakthroughs, but Andrew no longer needed a clinical explanation. He had seen with his own eyes what love, patience, and unexpected grace could do. They attended Malik's first recital as a family. Lily sat in the front row, a hand-folded origami swan in her lap. When Malik bowed, he looked at her first. And in that silent exchange, something unspoken passed between them, something no applause could ever capture. It was a reminder that sometimes, the world doesn't change through grand gestures or sweeping policies. Sometimes it changes because a child decides to sit on a dirty subway floor and listen. Because another child decides to keep playing, even when no one claps. Because one man, taught by numbers and control, allows himself to be humbled by the simple purity of a song. In the end, Andrew's greatest investment wasn't in code or capital, it was in the belief that people, no matter how different, could lift each other toward healing. That a billionaire could learn humanity from a boy with nothing but a violin. That a little girl who once lived in silence could write a new story, not with words, but with music. And in that story, they all found themselves together. Sometimes, the most powerful moments in life aren't found in boardrooms or mansions, but in the quiet corners of the world, where pain meets hope, and strangers become family. This wasn't just a story about a billionaire or a violinist. It was about the music that lives in all of us, the silent songs of resilience, of compassion, of unexpected connection. And maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder that no matter how far apart our worlds may seem, one small act of kindness can bridge the gap. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true, powerful, real-life inspired stories. Because sometimes, the world just needs to slow down and listen. Thanks for watching.